PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. And on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub, we are going to be doing a player profile. And on what we do here on Player Profiles, that we look at a career of a current Vegas Golden Knights player. We have done a handful of these throughout the past two seasons. And on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub, we are going to be talking about Paul Cotter. Now, Paul Cotter, this is one of the younger players on your Vegas Golden Knights. He's been on the Vegas Golden Knights over the last couple of seasons, but we have not done a player profile on him. We have not really broke down Paul Cotter in itself. So we're going to be doing that today here on Vegas Hockey Hub on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. Check out their website as they have about a dozen shows on the network, including Vegas Hockey Hub. So I would say go to the website and check out everything we have on the network. We also have social media pages on all major platforms at PR Connections. If you're on YouTube, subscribe and like this video as it helps out the network. If you want to follow us on social media, we are on all major platforms as well. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We are everywhere at Vegas Hockey Hub. So if you want to help support the network, that would be greatly help. And if you also want to follow your host on social media, I am everywhere as well at Ian J. Rickelli. The sponsor of PR Connections Radio is paidperletter.com. So go to the website, paidperletter.com, and use the /Uncle Dan to get started today. Now, with Paul Cotter, this is a guy very young, someone who has only, like I've been saying, playing a couple of years in the NHL. But what I can appreciate about Paul Cotter is the way he plays. He is someone who has aggression. He's someone who plays with certain amount of, you know what, I got to get down to the ice. I got to get in the offensive zone. I have to attack. That is what Paul Cotter does, and I have to be respectful of that. I like what he does in his game. Now, we will talk about a con of his later in the show, but in terms of positives, his hustle, his energy, the fact that he can score goals when needed, that's something that you can really appreciate about Paul Cotter, and an asset the Vegas Golden Knights have definitely been able to use to their advantage over the last two seasons with your Vegas Golden Knights. Now, overall, when it comes to Paul Cotter, to me, this is just a situation of being a young guy, someone who's only been a couple of years in at this point. Now, breaking this down, Paul Cotter, this is someone who was drafted in 2018, so he was part of the second draft class of your Vegas Golden Knights. He came from the United States Hockey League, and with Paul Cotter, this is somebody who, when you actually study and look at who else was in that 2018 NHL draft, it's actually kind of interesting to see who came from that same round as a Paul Cotter. Because just to kind of give you a little bit of cliff notes here, when it came to Paul Cotter, when it came to the Vegas Golden Knights organization, this 2018 NHL draft, he was drafted in the round 4. And not only did they get this pick from the Tampa Bay Lightning during the 2017 NHL expansion draft, we actually have talked about that video once before. I'll provide a link right up here in post-production so that you'll be able to find that episode. We actually talked about the 2017 NHL expansion draft, and we actually talked about the 2018 NHL entry draft, looking back at it 5 years later. So we definitely have talked about that. Now, this fourth round has actually produced some really good players, but when it comes to Paul Cotter, you know, you have Kurashev from the Chicago Blackhawks. You have, you know, some really good, solid players. The goaltender from the Arizona Coyotes, for example, he's one of them. So, you know, it's only been about 5 years, but overall, this has been a really, you know, kind of steady draft in that situation there. But overall, the Vegas Golden Knights, they acquire Paul Cotter. They draft him in the fourth round in 2018. Now, while he is playing in the United States Hockey League, I do want to mention this. You know, he is in the United States Hockey League. He is playing for the Lincoln Stars at the time. And with Paul Cotter, it's actually interesting to study and kind of look at what he did throughout his career, because he only played one season in the United States Hockey League, because he only spent 1 year in the North American Hockey League playing for the Blizzard. Now he's playing only 1 year in the United States Hockey League playing for the Stars. But with Paul Cotter, what I find interesting about him is that, when he was in the North American Hockey League, he had 60 points and over 100 penalty minutes in that season. He goes to the United States Hockey League. He has about 60 penalty minutes and 18 goals on the season. There's also the same Paul Cotter who in that 2018 season, he would be voted to the all-rookie team in the United States Hockey League, as you see right down there. But what I found interesting about the 2017-2018 United States Hockey League season is the fact that there is some good talent that actually came from the United States Hockey League at the same time that he was there. Not only did you have guys like Jackson Cates, who has actually become a really solid player from the Philadelphia Flyers organization, Jack Dugan, who was drafted by the Vegas Golden Knights in 2017. He was from the All United States Hockey League. Jack Drury, who is now playing for the Carolina Hurricanes, has become a solid everyday member, really out there in Carolina. But more importantly, the Lincoln Stars, they were a team that made it to the Clark Cup playoffs, which is what the playoff system is in United States Hockey League, and they would lose in the semifinals, and they would lose to Waterloo. So unfortunately for Paul Cotter, he would only spend one season in the United States Hockey League. But overall, when it comes to Paul Cotter, his 2 seasons playing junior hockey, 1 in North American Hockey League and 2 in the United States Hockey League, he was kind of setting himself up as someone who has a future talent. He was setting himself up as someone who could be a good player someday in the NHL. And the fact that he had scored a bunch of goals in those 2 seasons, and the fact that he had around 100 points in that short time span, it really shows you that Paul Cotter did have some potential, and his ceiling was going to be good moving forward. Now, I did mention this. This was United States Hockey League. Only 1 season there. You see the stats right down there. 18 goals, 21 assists, and 39 points. He also had 64 penalty minutes in 51 games. And with Paul Cotter, this is just a situation where you really sit here and look at what he did throughout his junior career, and it kind of helped elevate him to the next level. There's also the same Paul Cotter that during those 2018 playoffs where they lost in the semifinals, he had 4 goals and 8 points in just 7 playoff games. So Paul Cotter really making a statement, really solidifying himself towards the next level. Now, because of that, he gets drafted by Vegas. We just talked about that earlier. He gets selected by them. And this would be an interesting pivot for Paul Cotter, because he would stay in junior hockey, but he would not stay in the North American Hockey League. He would not stay in the United States Hockey League, but instead, Paul Cotter would play at Western Michigan. So Western Michigan, they are a top 25. They're normally ranked in college hockey. Paul Cotter would go over and play there in 2018-2019. That team would be ranked in the top 20, and they would actually lose to Colorado in the semifinals later that year with the NCAA. But more importantly, with Western Michigan, Paul Cotter would join a roster of future NHLers. Buffalo Sabres defenseman Mateus Samuelsson, Philadelphia Flyers forward Wade Allison. Like, there was some good talent on that roster alongside Paul Cotter. And even though it was a short cup of coffee and it really wasn't that much, like I said, and he only played, that one season out there in Western Michigan, it is interesting how he did play out there in college hockey, but then he would actually be converted and transferred over to the Ontario Hockey League out there in Canada. He would go and join the London Knights of the OHL. And when it came to the London Knights of the OHL 2018-2019, he would play around 50 games that year and actually would not do half bad. 9 goals, 26 points, 25 penalty minutes as he helped the London Knights advance into the playoffs in 2018-2019. Now, this is also the same team out there in London that would lose in the conference semifinals. So they would beat Windsor, and then they would lose in the semifinals that year in 2019. Now, Paul Cotter, during the playoffs in 2019, he played in 11 games. He did register some penalty minutes there with the London Knights. Now, good news for Paul Cotter is that he would be in his final season playing junior hockey after 2019. He wouldn't go back to the London Knights. He wouldn't go play for the Western Michigan. He wouldn't go to the USHL. He wouldn't go for the North American Hockey League. No, what Paul Cotter would do is actually very interesting. So after 2019, after spending all that time going through juniors and going around from team to team, he would do something really interesting, and that would be go play professional hockey. He would join the minor league ranks as he would go and join the Chicago Wolves to begin the 2019-2020 season. And with Paul Cotter, it's just interesting to see how, his first season playing in Chicago, he would actually, go out and do certain things. And this is the same Chicago Wolves who in 2019-2020, they have some good talent on that team. Like, a lot of people don't mention it, but I will. When it comes to the Chicago Wolves and who they had on that roster in 2019-2020, they had some future guys who would be in the NHL, led also by players who were in the NHL at that point. The 2019 Chicago Wolves, they would have future NHLers like Dylan Coghlan, Nick Waugh, Keegan Kolazar. You also had guys like Nick Hague on the defense, Braden Bahal, Jake Bischoff, who's the captain of the Henderson Silver Knights. He was there. Zach Whitecloud was there. So much of that young talent that is on the Golden Knights roster today, they were on the 2019 Chicago Wolves alongside Paul Cotter. And that season, playing for the Chicago Wolves, in his first season while suiting up for them, he would actually play 56 games. And more importantly, for Paul Cotter, he would have 4 goals, 9 points, and 24 penalty minutes in his first full season playing professional hockey. So I really like what we saw from him there. It's just a situation where Paul Cotter, he's a young guy. He's really kind of transitioning over from junior hockey and getting over to professional hockey. And he's kind of having to learn that learning curve over from the OHL to the AHL. Now, with Paul Cotter, this is just a situation where he would actually get called up for the first time in his career. As on May 4th, 2019, May 4th, May the 4th be with you, Star Wars, great reference there. When it comes to Paul Cotter, he would get called up to the Vegas Golden Knights. He would not play, but he would be a healthy scratch. He would travel with the team, and that was really his first taste, his first lick of being in the NHL. Similar to the Jari Patara situation, where he got called up for the first time in 2021, despite not playing, he would be on the main roster with the NHL. And those are always valuable lessons for these young guys. If you're Paul Cotter, just think about it for a minute. This is somebody who is just 20 years old. And this is someone who's actually being with the Vegas Golden Knights at that young of an age. This is also someone who, at that point, 20 years old, you've played in the AHL, you're playing professional hockey, you're suiting up, you're being part of a professional hockey team, and now you get the experience of being at the NHL level. Wow, just absolute incredible there. So fast forward into 2020, 2021, the COVID season, which was definitely a big learning curve. And also, if you're a prospect at that time, that definitely hurt you, considering all of the restrictions that were on minor league hockey and college hockey and junior hockey. But how did that affect Paul Cotter? Well, in 2020, 2021, their first season going to be at the Henderson Silver Knights after relocating from Chicago, Paul Cotter would be named on the top 10 list when it came to prospects for your Vegas Golden Knights. So Paul Cotter definitely earning his stripes and earning his ranks by being a top 10 prospect for the first time as a 21-year-old. And in 2020, 2021, he would end up having 5 goals and 16 points with the Henderson Silver Knights. He would actually have less penalty minutes than he did the year before with 18. He also would find his first action in the Calder Cup playoffs, playing in 4 games for the Henderson Silver Knights, registering only 1 point in that situation. So for Paul Cotter in 2020, 2021, this is somebody who is all outside of just playing for the AHL. They had what they called a taxi squad at the time. Now, for anybody who doesn't remember the craziness of the 2020 COVID season, a taxi squad was a group of players that would be allowed to pretty much go from the AHL to the NHL, NHL to the AHL, and back and forth. The taxi squad was essentially a group of like 7 or 8 players that were allowed to kind of be a buffer zone between AHL and NHL. Really weird time indeed. But with Paul Cotter, he was part of the taxi squad, and he actually did be a healthy scratch at times in the 2020-2021 season. And Paul Cotter was really making himself well known. He was actually jumping up in the charts when it came to the Golden Knights prospect list. At one point, Paul Cotter, he was at the number 7 spot. And then towards the end, he was a top 5 prospect with the Vegas Golden Knights as he was kind of getting towards the end of his amateur, kind of AHL level career with the Vegas Golden Knights. And his final season playing in the AHL, 2021-2022, this would be the breakout season for Paul Cotter, as in 59 games, he would have 19 goals and 15 assists, plus a whopping 60 penalty minutes with the Henderson Silver Knights. And after having this breakout season, after being able to kind of make himself more of a big name and kind of getting himself out there in the AHL, he would be rewarded by your Vegas Golden Knights. As on November 9th, 2021, Paul Cotter would be called up to the Vegas Golden Knights, but with a twist. He would actually start his first ever NHL game against the Seattle Kraken. Now, Paul Cotter did not do much in this said game, but what a moment for Paul Cotter, for somebody who at this point, 22 years of age, and someone who's able to play his first ever game in the NHL. So you go from being drafted in 2018 to then making the jump to the professional hockey in 2019 to being a top prospect in 2020 to now playing your first ever game in 2021. What an incredible experience by Paul Cotter. And I do have to mention, with the Vegas Golden Knights, he would play 7 games that year in 2021, 2022. He'd actually scored 2 goals in 2021, 2022. And by the way, here's a little fun fact for you. This does come from Hockey Reference, by the way. I did not know this off the top of my head. But with Paul Cotter, he was actually one of the first players to really start scoring for the Vegas Golden Knights under the age of 25. There really isn't many players who score young with the Golden Knights organization. Cody Glass, I know he did it. You also have very early this year, Lucas Cormier. He scored at a young age, the Vegas Golden Knights. I also know Mason Morelli. He scored, but he was not really that much older. When it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights, there isn't many players that you would say under the age of 23 have scored for the Vegas Golden Knights. But Paul Cotter is on that list and is actually one of the special few that have actually skated, they've suited up, and they've scored goals for the Vegas Golden Knights. Brennan Brisson in 2023, 2024, definitely part of that as well. But how did Paul Cotter do towards the end of his tenure in the AHL? Well, this is from Hockey Reference. Paul Cotter, his stats in the AHL, playing over those 3 seasons for the Henderson Silver Knights, 29 goals, 60 points, over 100 penalty minutes in the AHL. So for a guy like Paul Cotter, he was definitely establishing himself as someone who could score when needed. He does pass the puck around, and he could drop the gloves when he needs to go. So for Paul Cotter, that was his final kind of resume in the AHL at that point in his career. Now, in the NHL, I already told you about the 2 goals he had in 7 games in 2021, 2022. But what about 2022, 2023? Not only would this be the first season where he was no longer playing in the minors, he was now a fully developed player. He was no longer a prospect. He is just now an NHL rookie. Well, for Paul Cotter, he would play 55 games for your Vegas Golden Knights in 2022, 2023, and he would actually make a big impact for Vegas. He would score a dozen goals for Vegas. He would put up 18 points in 55 games for the Vegas Golden Knights. There's also the same Paul Cotter who, due to injuries, was on the first line with certain points in 2022, 2023. It is somebody in Paul Cotter who became a mainstay on the middle six and earned his roster spot in the NHL with your Vegas Golden Knights. Now, Paul Cotter is an interesting situation because this is a Paul Cotter who did not play in the postseason in 2022-2023, as it would be that he would be a healthy scratch for the entirety of the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs. And for Paul Cotter, he would receive a ring, he would earn a championship title, but he did not play a single game throughout the entire 2023 run where your Vegas Golden Knights would be crowned Stanley Cup champions. Now, no one's going to know how that feels. It's not like you can go up and ask Paul Cotter, how did that feel? But it's interesting as someone who's only 23 years old, you're winning a Stanley Cup with your teammates, but you're not skating up for it. You're at the champagne ceremony. You saw him with the Golden Knights championship shirt. He's in the clubhouse. He's in the locker room. They're all celebrating, having a great time. But he was a healthy scratch throughout the entire thing. So it's very interesting on that note to really bring up the fact that Paul Cotter at this point, he's a Stanley Cup champion. He was a top prospect. And this is someone who has earned at a certain point in time a lot of accolades at this point in his career. Now, with Paul Cotter, 2023, 2024, he started out on the middle six for the Vegas Golden Knights. He has been fluctuating throughout the lineup. He has been on the second line. He's been on the third line. He even had a small cup of coffee on the fourth line with all the injuries that stacked up. But with Paul Cotter, he has now implemented himself as a middle six forward. Paul Cotter, at this point in time, has been able to kind of put himself in a valuable spot and earn an opportunity to be a middle six forward. This is a guy who's earned essentially an everyday starter spot with your Vegas Golden Knights, regardless if it's on line 2 or line 3. That's besides the point. When it comes to Paul Cotter, this is just a situation where you look at him and you see what he can provide with the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, this is Paul Cotter's stats throughout 3 seasons playing in the NHL. Now, Paul Cotter, 22 goals, 42 points, and 60 penalty minutes in around 125 games in the NHL. Now, I like Paul Cotter. I like what we've seen from him as a player. I mean, this is somebody who scored 7 goals this season in the NHL. Not bad for somebody like him. You also have to remind yourself that when it comes to Paul Cotter, he also has 7 goals, 15 assists on the season for your Vegas Golden Knights. He's also the same person who right now has 39 penalty minutes. He's actually among one of the leaders on the Golden Knights organization in penalty minutes. So for the Vegas Golden Knights, for Paul Cotter, I like what we've seen from him. I like what his potential is. And more importantly, with a guy like Paul Cotter, he's just getting started. I mean, this is someone in Paul Cotter who, he's barely 24 years old, and he has so much time to really kind of earn his stripes and kind of become a more constant player for the Vegas Golden Knights. After all, there's also the same Paul Cotter who, thanks to CapFriendly.com, he will be under contract for your Vegas Golden Knights until 2026. He's still on a rookie deal. He's still on a young contract. And when it comes to Paul Cotter, I can sit here and say that he's only going to get better and better and better. I mean, the trend really says it for himself. He only had 2 points in his first season playing for the Golden Knights organization. And then year 2, he does do a lot better. He actually ends up getting 18 points in that situation. And then this season, he ends up having 22 points for the Vegas Golden Knights. So to me, it's like a step ladder with Paul Cotter. He's very slowly just kind of increasing his points. He's slowly increasing his assists, his penalty minutes. They're going up in that situation. So with Paul Cotter, I think with the more games he plays, the more experience he gets, and the fact that he's only making $775,000 this year and next year and the year after that, I would not be surprised if Paul Cotter ends up being somebody who will be on that same line, on the third line, with somebody like, let's just say, for example, Michael Amadio, Brett Howden, William Karlsson, if he's still on the third line center. Depending on what moves are made this offseason, we could also see a possibility of maybe Chandler Stevenson if he comes back. Of course, we'll talk about free agency and everything when that time comes. But with Paul Cotter, I really sit here and analyze what he has done, and I can appreciate what he has accomplished in the NHL, considering what he started. The fact that he went from the North American Hockey League, then he gets promoted to the United States Hockey League. He gets drafted. He has a small cup of coffee in the NCAA playing college hockey. Then he goes to the Ontario Hockey League, which is part of the Canadian Hockey League. Then he plays minor league hockey in the AHL before finally getting his moment in the NHL. So for a guy like Paul Cotter, I can sit here and say that he has a bright future, and I like what we're going to see from him long term. And this is another edition of Player Profile here on Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. And if you like all of this content, subscribe to the network. We are on PR Connections Radio. We have the website, www.prconnectionsradio.com. We have all the social media pages at PR Connections Radio on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We are everywhere on the network. We also have our own social media platforms at Vegas Hockey Hub on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We are everywhere. You can't escape us. I also will have to say that when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights, we are going to continue to put out content. In fact, let me give you a little teaser for what's going to coming up next. We're also going to be doing our Vegas Hockey Hub recap shows. We've been doing those throughout the entire season. We also have the 32 NHL Arenas video. Due to the quality of that video, the first time I did it, I'm going to go back into the booth and I'm going to re-record that. So the ranking of all 32 NHL Arenas, that's going to be coming up soon. You also have the fact that we're going to be doing more player profiles. That's going to be in the works. In fact, we have one script that is done, and we're going to be uploading that player profile very soon. And I also have to mention that because we are Vegas Hockey Hub, we also have so much content that is a reoccurring theme on this channel. We already know about Vegas Hockey Hub recap. We do player profiles, the one you're watching right now. We have Prospect Watch, where we talk about prospects throughout the entire season with your Vegas Golden Knights. And then also, when it comes to this channel, we also have reoccurring segments. Like, for example, we also have talking about the Henderson Silver Knights, doing a report on them in the AHL. We've also done reports in the past where we talk about, certain drafts. We look back 5 years later at a certain draft that happened. 5 years later, we look back at a certain offseason and see what had happened there. We do retrospectives and stuff like that. There's so much content on this network. We upload every single day, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. So you're always going to be able to find content from us, and that is what we supply here on Vegas Hockey Hub. So until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli, and continue watching hockey. Go support junior hockey, and go Knights, go.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.